Hello folks, it's Andrew here from Plainfield Public Library and I'm back with another episode from our live classic serial. We've been doing this for quite a little while now on various different platforms. This is episode 4 of Treasure Island, but as a matter of fact we've been doing this for a couple of years for different books, and if you're interested in seeing some of those other books you can just head to our other platform, our old Facebook Live page, and you'll see actually that there's a set of playlists there for over a dozen other books if you ever want to head on back there and have a look at the other books that we've broadcast over the last couple of years. Anyway, back to Treasure Island. I'll bring that up again a little bit towards the end there, the link there. Back to Treasure Island. We're on episode 4 today, and it's brought us to Bristol, on the brink of setting sail for Treasure Island. We have the map. The ship is chartered. The foolish squire has been blabbing about their mission all over Bristol and seems to have attracted the attention of various different crew members, including a cook, one Long John Silver, who is very interested in the voyage and who's coming along with them. Well, everybody trusts him so far. In fact, Dr. Livesey says, "I will say this, John Silver suits me." Well, we're about to see this ship, the Hispaniola, for the first time. So, if you would like to come along, let's carry on with Treasure Island. Chapter 9. Powder and Arms. The Hispaniola lay some way out, and we went under the figureheads and round the sterns of many other ships, and their cables sometimes grated underneath our keel and sometimes swung above us. At last, however, we got alongside and were met and saluted as we stepped aboard by the mate, Mr. Arrow, a weather-beaten old sailor with earrings in his ears and a squint. He and the squire were very thick and friendly, and I soon observed that things were not the same between Mr. Trelawney and the captain. This last was a sharp-looking man who seemed angry with everything on board and was soon to tell us why, for we'd hardly got down into the captain when a sailor followed us. "Captain Smollett, sir, asking to speak with you," said he. "I'm always at the captain's orders. Show him in," said the squire. The captain, who was close behind his messenger, entered at once and shut the door behind him. "Well, Captain Smollett, what have you to say? All well, I hope? All ship-shape and seaworthy?" "Well, sir," said the captain, "better speak plain, I believe, even at the risk of offence. I don't like this cruise. I don't like the men, and I don't like my officer. That's short and sweet." "Perhaps, sir, you don't like the ship?" inquired the squire, very angry, as I could see. "I can't speak to that, sir, not having seen her tried," said the captain. "She seems a clever craft, more I can't say." "Possibly, sir, you may not like your employer, either," said the squire. But here Dr. Livesey cut in. "Stay a bit," said he, "stay a bit. No use of such questions as that but to produce ill feeling. The captain has said too much or he has said too little, and I'm bound to say that I'd require an explanation of his words. You don't, you say, like this cruise. Now why?" "I was engaged, sir, on what we call sealed orders, to sail this ship for that gentleman where he should bid me," said the captain. "So far, so good. But now I find that every man before the mast knows more than I do. I don't call that fair, do you?" "No," said Dr. Livesey, "I don't." "Next," said the captain, "I learn we're going after treasure. Hear it from my own hands, mind you. Now, treasure is ticklish work. I don't like treasure voyages on any account, and I don't like them, above all, when they're secret, and when, begging your pardon, Mr. Trelawney, the secret has been told to the parrot." "Silver's parrot?" asked the squire. "It's a way of speaking," said the captain. "Blabbed, I mean. It's my belief neither of you gentlemen know what you're about. But I'll tell you my way of it. Life or death, and a close run." "That is all clear, and I dare say true enough," replied Dr. Livesey. "We take the risk, but we're not so ignorant as you believe us. Next, you say you don't like the crew. Are they not good seamen?" "I don't like them, sir," returned Captain Smollett, "and I think I should have had the choosing of my own hands, if you go to that." "Perhaps you should," replied the doctor. "My friend should perhaps have taken you along with him, but the slight, if there be one, was unintentional. And you don't like Mr. Arrow?" "I don't, sir. I believe he's a good seaman, but he's too free with the crew to be a good officer. A mate should keep himself to himself, shouldn't drink with the men before the mast." "Do you mean he drinks?" cried the squire. "No, sir," replied the captain, "only that he's too familiar." "Well, now, and the short and the long of it, captain?" asked the doctor. "Tell us what you want." "Well, gentlemen, are you determined to go on this cruise?" "Like iron," answered the squire. "Very good," said the captain. Then as you've heard me very patiently, saying things that I could not prove, hear me a few words more. They are putting the powder and the arms in the fore hold. Now you have a good place under the cabin, why not put them there? First point. Then you are bringing 4 of your own people with you, and they tell me some of them are to be berthed forward. Why not give them the berths here, beside the cabin? Second point. Any more? Asked Mr. Trelawney. One more, said the captain. There's been too much blabbing already. Far too much, agreed the doctor. Tell you what I've heard myself, continued the Captain Smollett, that you have a map of an island, and there's crosses on the map to show where treasure is, and that the island lies, and he named the latitude and longitude exactly. I never told that, cried the squire, to a soul. The hands know it, sir, returned the captain. Livesey, that must have been you, or Hawkins, cried the squire. Doesn't matter much who it was, replied the doctor, and I could see that neither he nor the captain paid much regard to Mr. Trelawney's protestations. Neither did I, to be sure. He was so loose a talker. Yet in this case I believe he was really right, and that nobody had told the situation of the island. Well, gentlemen, continued the captain, I don't know who has this map, but I make it a point it shall be kept secret even from me and Mr. Arrow. Otherwise I would ask you to let me resign. I see, said the doctor. You wish us to keep this matter dark, and to make a garrison of the stern part of the ship, manned with my friend's own people, and provided with all the arms and powder on board. In other words, you fear a mutiny. Sir, said Captain Smollett, with no intention to take offence, I deny your right to put words into my mouth. No captain, sir, would be justified in going to sea at all if he'd ground enough to say that. As for Mr. Arrow, I believe him thoroughly honest. Some of the men are the same. All may be, for what I know. But I am responsible for the ship's safety and the life of every man jack aboard her. I see things going, as I think, not quite right. And I ask you to take certain precautions or let me resign my berth. And that's all. Captain Smollett, began the doctor with a smile, did ever you hear the fable of the mountain and the mouse? You'll excuse me, I dare say, but you remind me of that fable. When you came in here, I'll stake my wig you meant more than this. Doctor, said the captain, you are smart. When I came in here I meant to get discharged. I'd no thought that Mr. Trelawney would hear a word. No more I would, cried the squire. Had Livesey not been here I should have seen you to the deuce. As it is, I've heard you. I will do as you desire, but I think the worse of you. That's as you please, sir, said the captain. You'll find I do my duty. And with that he took his leave. Trelawney, said the doctor, contrary to all my notions, I believed you have managed to get 2 honest men on board with you, that man and John Silver. Silver, if you like, cried the squire, but as for that intolerable humbug, I declare I think his conduct unmanly, unsailorly, and downright un-English. Well, said the doctor, we shall see. And when we came on deck, the men had already begun to take out the arms and powder, yo-ho-hoing at their work, while the captain and Mr. Arrow stood by superintending. The new arrangement was quite to my liking. The whole schooner had been overhauled. 6 berths had been made astern out of what had been the after part of the main hold, and this set of cabins was only joined to the galley in the forecastle by a sparred passage on the port side. It had been originally meant that the captain, Mr. Arrow, Hunter, Joyce, the doctor, and the squire were to occupy these 6 berths. Now, Redruth and I were to get 2 of them, and Mr. Arrow and the captain were to sleep on deck in the companion, which had been enlarged on either side till you might almost have called it a roundhouse. Very low it was, still, of course, but there was room to swing 2 hammocks, and even the mate seemed pleased with the arrangement. Even he, perhaps, had been doubtful as to the crew, but that is only guess, for as you shall hear, we had not long the benefit of his opinion. We were all hard at work, changing the powder and the berths, when the last man or 2, and Long John along with them, came off in a shore boat. The cook came up the side like a monkey for cleverness, and as soon as he saw what was doing, "So, mates," says he, "what's this?" "We're changing the powder, Jack," answers one. "Why, by the powers," cried Long John, "if we do, we'll miss the morning tide." "My orders," said the captain shortly. "You may go below, my man. Hands will want supper." "Aye, aye, sir," answered the cook, and touching his forelock, he disappeared at once in the direction of his galley. "That's a good man, Captain," said the doctor. "Very likely, sir," replied Captain Smollett. "Easy with that, men, easy," he ran on, to the fellows who were shifting the power, and then, suddenly observing me examining the swivel we carried amidships, a long brass 9. "Here, you, ship's boy," he cried, "off, out of that! Off with you to the cook and get some work." And then, as I was hurrying off, I heard him say quite loudly to the doctor, "I'll have no favourites on my ship." I assure you I was quite of the squire's way of thinking, and hated the captain deeply. Part 10. The Voyage. All that night we were in a great bustle, getting things stowed in their place, and boatfuls of the squire's friends, Mr. Blandley and the like, coming off to wish him a good voyage and a safe return. We'd never had a night at the Admiral Benbow when I had half the work, and I was dog-tired when a little before dawn the boatswain sounded his pipe and the crew began to man the capstan bars. I might have been twice as weary, yet I would not have left the deck. All was so new and interesting to me. The brief commands, the shrill note of the whistle, the men bustling to their places in the glimmer of the ship's lanterns. "Now, Barbecue, tip us a stave," cried one voice. "The old one," cried another. "Aye, aye, mate," said Long John, who was standing by, with his crutch under his arm, and at once broke out in the air and words I knew so well. 15 men on the dead man's chest, and then the whole crew bore chorus, "Yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum," and at the third ho drove the bars before them with a will. Even at that exciting moment it carried me back to the old Admiral Benbow in a second, and I seemed to hear the voice of the captain piping in the chorus. But soon the anchor was short up, soon it was hanging dripping at the bows, soon the sails began to draw and the land and shipping to flit by on either side, and before I could lie down to snatch an hour of slumber, the Hispaniola had begun her voyage to the Isle of Treasure. I'm not going to relate that voyage in detail. It was fairly prosperous. The ship proved to be a good ship, the crew were capable seamen, and the captain thoroughly understood his business. But before we came the length of Treasure Island, 2 or 3 things had happened which require to be known. Mr. Arrow, first of all, turned out even worse than the captain had feared. He had no command among the men, and people did what they pleased with him. But that was by no means the worst of it, for after a day or 2 at sea he began to appear on deck with hazy eyes, red cheeks, stuttering tongue, and other marks of drunkenness. Time after time he was ordered below in disgrace. Sometimes he fell and cut himself, sometimes he lay all day long in his little bunk at one side of the companion. Sometimes for a day or 2 he would be almost sober and attend to his work, at least passively. In the meantime we could never make out where he got the drink. That was the ship's mystery. Watch him as we pleased, we could do nothing to solve it, and when we asked him to his face, he would only laugh if he were drunk, and if he were sober deny solemnly that he ever tasted anything but water. He was not only useless as an officer and a bad influence amongst the men, but it was plain that at this rate he must soon kill himself outright, so nobody was much surprised nor very sorry when one dark night with a head sea he disappeared entirely and was seen no more. "Overboard," said the captain. "Well, gentlemen, that saves the trouble of putting him in irons." But there we were, without a mate, and it was necessary, of course, to advance one of the men. The boatswain, Job Anderson, was the likeliest man aboard, and although he kept his old title, he served in a way as a mate. Mr. Trelawney had followed the sea, and his knowledge made him very useful, for he often took a watch himself in easy weather, and the coxswain, Israel Hands, was a careful, wily old experienced seaman who would be trusted at a pinch with almost anything. He was a great confidant of Long John Silver, and so the mention of his name leads me on to speak of our ship's cook, Barbecue, as the people called him. Aboard ship he carried his crutch by a lanyard round his neck, to have both hands as free as possible. It was something to see him wedge the foot of the crutch against a bulkhead, and propped against it, yielding to every movement of the ship, get on with his cooking like someone safe ashore. Still more strange was it to see him in the heaviest of weather cross the deck. He had a line or 2 rigged up to help him across the widest spaces. Long John's earrings they were called, and he would hand himself from one place to another, now using the crutch, now trailing it alongside by the lanyard, as quickly as another man could walk. Yet some of the men who'd sailed with him before expressed their pity to see him so reduced. "He's no common man, Barbecue," said the coxswain to me. "He had good schooling in his young days, and can speak like a book when so minded, and brave. Lion's nothing alongside of Long John. I've seen him grapple 4 and knock their heads together, him unarmed." All the crew respected and even obeyed him. He had a way of talking to each and doing everybody some particular service. To me he was unweariedly kind, and always glad to see me in the galley, which he kept as clean as a new pin, the dishes hanging up burnished, and his parrot in a cage in one corner. "Come away, Hawkins," he would say. "Come and have a yarn with John. Nobody more welcome than yourself, my son. Sit you down and hear the news. Here's Captain Flint. I calls my parrot Captain Flint, after the famous buccaneer. Here's Captain Flint predicting success to our voyage. Want you, Captain?" And the parrot would say with great rapidity, "Pieces of 8, pieces of 8, pieces of 8, till you wondered that it was not out of breath, or till John threw his handkerchief over the cage. "Now that bird," he would say, "is maybe 200 years old, Hawkins. They live forever, mostly, and if anybody's seen more wickedness, it must be the devil himself. She sailed with England, the great Captain England, the pirate. She's been at Madagascar, and Malabar, and Suriname, and Providence, and Portobello. She was at the fishing up of the wrecked plate ships. As there she learned pieces of 8, little wonder, 350,000 of 'em, Hawkins. She was at the boarding of the Viceroy of the Indies, out of Goa, she was, and to look at her you would think she was a babby. But you smelt powder, didn't you, Captain?" "Stand by to go about," the parrot would scream. "Ah, she's a handsome craft, she is," the cook would say, and give her sugar from his pocket, and then the bird would peck at the bars and swear straight on, passing belief for wickedness. "There," John would add, "you can't touch pitch and not be mucked, lad. Here's this poor old innocent bird of mine swearing blue fire, and none the wiser, you may lay to that. She would swear the same, in a manner of speaking, before Chaplain." John would touch his forelock with a solemn way he had, and make me think he was the best of men. In the meantime, the Squire and Captain Smollett were still on pretty distant terms with one another. The Squire made no bones about the matter. He despised the Captain. The Captain, on his part, never spoke but when he was spoken to, and then sharp and short and dry, and not a word wasted. He owned when driven into a corner that he seemed to have been wrong about the crew, that some of them were as brisk as he wanted to see, and all had behaved fairly well. As for the ship, he had taken a downright fancy to her. "She'll lie a point nearer the wind than a man has a right to expect of his own married wife, sir." But he would say, "All I said is, we're not at home again, and I don't like the cruise." Squire at this would turn away and march up and down the deck, chin in air. "Trifle more of that, man," he would say, "and I shall explode." We had some heavy weather, which only proved the qualities of the Hispaniola. Every man on board seemed well content, and they must have been hard to please if they'd been otherwise, for it is my belief there never was a ship's company so spoiled since Noah put to sea. Double grog was going on the least excuse. There was duff on odd days, as for instance, if the Squire heard it was any man's birthday, and always a barrel of apples, standing broached in the waist for anybody to help himself that had a fancy. "Never knew good come of it yet," the captain says to Dr. Livesey. "Spoil forecastle hands, make devils. That's my belief." But good did come of the apple barrel, as you shall hear, for it had not been for that we should have had no note of warning, and might all have perished by the hand of treachery. This was how it came about. We'd run up the trades to get the wind of the island we were after. I'm not allowed to be more plain, and now we were running down for it with a bright lookout day and night. It was about the last day of our outward voyage by the largest computation. Some time that night, or latest before noon of the morrow, we should sight the treasure island. We were heading south-southwest, and had a steady breeze abeam and a quiet sea. The Hispaniola rolled steadily, dipping her bowsprit now and then with a whiff of spray. All was drawing alow and aloft. Everybody was in the bravest spirits, because we were now so near an end of the first part of our adventure. Now, just after sundown, when all my work was over and I was on my way to my berth, it occurred to me that I should like an apple. I ran on deck. The watch was all forward, looking out for the island. The man at the helm was watching the luff of the sail and whistling away gently to himself, and that was the only sound excepting the swish of the sea against the bows and around the sides of the ship. I got bodily into the apple barrel and found there was scarce an apple left. But sitting down there in the dark, what with the sound of the waters and the rocking movement of the ship, I'd either fallen asleep or was close on the point of doing so, when a heavy man sat down with rather a clash close by. The barrel shook as he leant his shoulders against it, and I was just about to jump up when the man began to speak. It was Silver's voice, and before I'd heard a dozen words, I would not have known myself for all the world, but lay there, trembling and listening in the extreme of fear and curiosity, for from these dozen words I understood that the lives of all the honest men aboard depended upon me alone. Part 11. What I heard in the apple barrel. "No, not I," said Silver. "Flint was captain, I was quartermaster, along my timber leg. Same broadside I lost my leg, old Pugh lost his deadlights. It was a master surgeon, him that amputated me, out of college and all, Latin by the bucket and what not. But he was hanged like a dog and sun-dried like the rest at Corso Castle. That was Roberts's men, that was, and come to changing names to their ships, Royal Fortune and so on. Now what a ship was christened, so let her stay, I says. So it was with the Cassandra, as brought us all safe home from Malabar, after England's took the Viceroy of the Indies. So it was with the old Walrus, Flint's old ship, as I've seen her muck with her red blood and fit to sink with gold." "Ah," cried another voice, that of the youngest hand on board, and evidently full of admiration. "He is the flower of the flock, was Flint." "Davis was a man too, by all accounts," said Silver. "I never sailed along of him, first with England, then with Flint, that's my story. Now here on my own account, in a manner of speaking. I laid by 900 safe from England, and 2,000 after Flint. That ain't bad for a man before the mast. All safe in bank. 'Tain't earning now. Isn't saving, does it? You may lay to that. Where's all England's men now? I don't know. Where's Flint's? And most of 'em aboard here, glad to get the duff. Been begging before that, some of 'em. Old Pugh, as had lost his sight and might have thought shame, spends £1,200 in a year like a lord in Parliament. Where's he now? Well, he's dead now and under hatches, but for 2 years before that, shiver my timbers, the man was starving. He begged and he stole and he cut throats and starved at that, by the powers." "Well, it ain't much use after all," said the young seaman. "'Tain't much use for fools, you may lay to that. That or nothing," cried Silver. "But now you look here. You're young, you are, but you're as smart as paint. See that when I set my eyes on you, and I'll talk to you like a man." You imagine how I felt when I heard this abominable old rogue addressing another in the very same words of flattery as he'd used to myself. I think if I'd been able, that I would have killed him through the barrel. Meanwhile he ran on, little supposing he was overheard. "Here is about gentlemen of fortune. They lives rough, and they risk swinging, but they eat and drink like fighting cocks. And when a cruise is done, why, it's hundreds of pounds instead of hundreds of farthings in their pockets. Now the most goes for rum and a good fling, and to sea again in their shirts. But that's not the course I lay. I puts it all away, some here, some there, and none too much anywheres by reason of suspicion. I'm 50, mark you. Once back from this cruise, I set up gentlemen in earnest. Time enough too, says you. But I've lived easy in the meantime, never denied myself of nothing heart desires, and slept soft and ate dainty all my days but when at sea. And how did I begin? Before the mast, like you." "Well," said the other, "but all the other money's gone now, isn't it? You don't show face in Bristol after this." Why, where might you suppose it was?" asked Silver derisively. "At Bristol, in banks and places," answered his companion. "It were," said the cook. "It were when we weighed anchor. But my old missus has it all by now, and the spyglass is sold, lease and goodwill and rigging, and the old girl's off to meet me. I would tell you where, for I trust you, but it make jealousy among the mates." "And can you trust your missus?" asked the other. "Gentlemen of fortune," returned the cook, "usually trusts little among themselves, and right they are, you may lay to it. But I have a way with me, I have. When a mate brings a slip on his cable, as one knows me, I mean, it won't be in the same world with old John. There was some that was feared of Pugh, and some that was feared of Flint. But Flint his own self was feared of me. Feared he was, and proud. He was the roughest crew afloat, was Flint. Devil himself would have been feared to go to sea with them. Well, now I tell you, I'm not a boasting man, and you've seen yourself how easy I keep company. But when I was quartermaster, lambs wasn't the word for Flint's old buccaneers. Now you may be sure of yourself in old John's ship." "Well, I'll tell you this now," replied the land. "I didn't half a quarter like the job till I had this talk with you, John, but there's my hand on it now." "And a brave lad you were, and smart too," answered Silver, shaking hands so heartily that all the barrel shook, "and a finer figurehead for a gentleman of fortune I never clapped my eyes on." By this time I'd begun to understanding the meaning of their terms. By a gentleman of fortune they plainly meant neither more nor less than a common pirate. and the little scene that I had overheard was the last act in the corruption of one of the honest hands, perhaps of the last one left aboard. But on this point I was soon to be relieved, for Silver, giving a little whistle, a third man strolled up and sat down by the party. "Dick's square," said Silver. "Oh, I knowed Dick was square," returned the voice of the coxswain, Israel Hands. "He's no fool, is Dick." And he turned his quid and spat. "But look here," he went on. "Here's what I want to know, Barbecue. How long are we going to stand off and on like a blessed bumboat? I've had almost enough of Captain Smollett. He's hazed me long enough, by thunder. I want to go into that cabin, I do. I want our pickles and wines and that." "Israel," said Silver, "your head ain't much account nor ever was. But you're able to hear, I reckon. Leastways your ears is big enough. Now here's what I say. You'll berth forward, and you'll live hard, and you'll speak soft, and you'll keep sober till I give the word, and you may lay to that, my son." "Well, I don't say no, do I?" growled the coxswain. "What I say is, when. That's what I say." "When? By the powers!" cried Silver. "Well, now, if you want to know, I'll tell you when. The last moment I can manage, and that's when. Here's a first-rate seaman, Captain Smollett, sails the blessed ship for us. Here's this squire and doctor with a map and such. Don't know where it is, do I? No more do you, says you. Well then, I mean this squire and doctor shall find this stuff and help us to get it aboard, by the powers. Then we'll see. If I was sure of you all sons of double Dutchmen, I'd have Captain Smollett navigate us halfway back again before I struck." "Well, we're all seamen aboard here, I should think," said the lad Dick. "We're all forecastle hands, you mean," snapped Silver. "We can steer, of course, but who's to set one? That's what all you gentlemen split on, first and last. If I had my way, I'd have Captain Smollett work us back into the trades at least. Then we'd have no blessed miscalculations and a spoonful of water a day. But I know the sort you are. I'll finish with 'em at the island as soon as the blunt's on board, and a pity it is. But you're never happy till you're drunk. Split my sides, I've a sick heart to sail with the likes of you." "Easy, Hall, Long John," cried Israel. "Who's a crossing of you?" "Why, how many tall ships, think ye, now have I seen laid aboard, and how many brisk lads drying in the sun at Execution Dock?" cried Silver. "And all for this same hurry and hurry and hurry. You hear me? I've seen a thing or two, see I have. If you would only lay your course and a point to windward, you would ride in carriages, you would. But not you. I know you. You'll have your mouthful of rum tomorrow and go hang." "Everybody knows she was a kind of a chaplain, John, but there's others that could hand and steer as well as you," said Israel. "They liked a bit of fun, they did. They wasn't so high and dry, nohow, but took their fling like jolly companions, every one." "So," says Silver. "Well, and where are they now? Pugh was that sort, and he died a beggarman. Flint was, and he died of rum at Savannah. It was a sweet crew, they was. Only where are they?" "But," asked Dick, "when do we lay 'em athwart? What are we to do with 'em anyhow?" "There's the man for me," cried the cook admiringly. "That's what I call business. Well, what would you think? Put 'em ashore like maroons? That would have been England's way. Or cut 'em down like that much pork? That would have been Flint's, or Billy Bones's." "Billy was the man for that," said Israel. "Dead men don't bite," says he. Well, he's dead now himself. He knows the long and short on it now. And if ever a rough hand come to port, it was Billy. "Right you are," said Silver. "Rough and ready. But mark you here, I'm an easy man. I'm quite the gentleman," says you. "But this time it's serious. Duty is duty, mates. I give my vote. Death. When I'm in Parliament and riding in my coach, I don't want none of these sea lawyers in the cabin a-coming home unlooked for, like the devil at prayers. Wait, is what I say, but when the time comes, well, let her rip." "John," cries the coxswain, "you're a man." "You'll say so, Israel, when you see," said Silver. "Only one thing I claim. I claim Trelawney. I'll wring his calf's head off his body with these hands. Dick," he added, breaking off, "you just jump up like a sweet lad and get me a apple to wet my pipe like." You may fancy the terror I was in. I should have leapt out and run for it if I'd found the strength, but my limbs and heart alike misgave me. I heard Dick began to rise, and then someone seemingly stopped him, and the voice of Hands exclaimed, "Oh, stow that! Don't you get sucking at that bilge, John. Let's have a go of the rum." "Dick," said Silver, "I trust you. I got a gauge on the keg, mind. There's the key. You fill a pannikin and bring it up." Terrified as I was, I could not help thinking to myself that this must have been how Mr. Arrow got the strong waters that destroyed him. Dick was gone but a little while, and during his absence Israel spoke straight on in the cook's ear. It was but a word or two that I could catch, and yet I gathered some important news, for besides other scraps that tended to the same purpose, this whole clause was audible. Not another man of them will join. Hence, there were still faithful men on board. When Dick returned, one after another of the trio took the pannikin and drank, one to luck, another with "Here's to old Flint," and Silver himself saying in a kind of a song, "Here's to ourselves and hold your luff, plenty of prizes and plenty of duff." Just then a sort of brightness fell upon me in the barrel, and looking up I found the moon had risen, and was silvering the mizzen top and shining white on the luff of the foresail, and almost at the same time the voice of the lookout shouted, "Land ho!" Well folks, that's the end of my time today. As I said, you can carry on with other stories if you like, if you head on down to our Facebook playlists, which are in the link which is just down there. As I say, that's it from me today. We'll carry on with chapter 12 on Wednesday, when we'll return once again to the story Treasure Island, which we're working our way through just now. So I'll be back again on Wednesday at 2 o'clock to carry on with the story. In the meantime, thank you for joining me very much this afternoon, and I wish you all a really good day ahead. Thanks again, and goodbye for now.